GamingBolt presents 15 gameplay glitches that actually became features in games. It's not often that people celebrate glitches in video games. Whenever they do, it's usually to point and laugh. But on a few rare occasions, those glitches actually turn out to not only improve that game, but change the industry as a whole. Gradius, the Konami code. Every game is created with a debug mode so the developers of the game can test it. This debug mode is a set of tools the developer can access while they're playing early versions of the game. It's usually disabled once the game is released. While working on Gradius, programmer Kazuhisa Hashimoto thought the game was too hard, so in order to debug the game, he developed a cheat code which granted players full power-ups, however he forgot to remove it. As a result, players were able to input a series of button presses and access most of the power-ups in the game. Tetris T-shaped spin. Originally in Tetris, you weren't supposed to be able to spin the T-shaped piece. Technically, in the original game, you can't spin it under normal circumstances. But when the piece is about to be laid down, if you press the spin button quick enough, it will spin, allowing you to slot it into places you weren't intended to. Rocket jumping. The original Quake is a fast-paced first-person shooter, but for some players, it wasn't fast enough. Soon, players found that if you jumped in air and fired a rocket directly down, the force of the explosion would propel the player up and forward, allowing you to reach new areas and get a height advantage on your opponents. Street Fighter II's combos. It sounds ridiculous, but believe it or not, before Street Fighter II, there weren't combos in fighting games. You just hit the attack button until your opponent died, more or less. All of that changed when producer Noritaka Funamizu was bug testing the game before release and discovered a fun bug. He discovered that if you launched an attack, you could cancel it by launching a different attack or move. This would allow the player to land several blows at once without giving your opponent a chance to get away. Difficulty curves in Space Invaders. Originally, the aliens in Space Invaders were supposed to all move at the same speed throughout each level. But developer Tomohiro Nishikado realized that the hardware at the time couldn't run the game as he intended. He discovered that once you killed some of the aliens, the game would speed up. Essentially, having so many aliens on the screen at the start of the game forces a major dip in the frame rate, and the more you kill, the less the computer has to deal with, thus making the frame rate climb to where it's supposed to be. This of course made later stages in the game more difficult, making the game more difficult as time went by. Super Mario Bros. Wall jumping. In the original Super Mario Bros., you could jump off a wall if you timed your jump correctly. This would enable you to jump higher and farther. This was a glitch though, as the developers never intended for this to remain in the game. Once they found out how much players enjoyed the bug, they decided to leave it for future titles. Race and Chase AI glitch. Developer DMA Design was working on a game called Race and Chase back in 1995. It was a top-down, vehicle-based action game that allowed you to play as a cop or criminal. But the game had massive problems, including one bug that turned the police AI into insane murderers. If you tapped a police car, they would go to the ends of the earth, plowing through street poles, people, and other obstacles to ram your car and kill you. The developers found this to be more fun than the game they were planning, and reworked the game into Grand Theft Auto, and later changed their own name to Rockstar. Skiing in Starsiege Tribes. Starsiege Tribes was an online multiplayer shooter in the same vein as Quake, but it had much bigger open worlds and allowed players to use vehicles. One other thing it allowed by mistake was what players now refer to as skiing. Due to the physics of the game, players discovered that if they repeatedly hit the jump button while going down hills, they would gain speed and momentum, then use their jetpacks at the bottom of the hill to quickly go down the next one. So many players started doing this to get an advantage in combat. It pretty much became mandatory if you wanted any chance of winning. The Spy in Team Fortress 2. Team Fortress was originally a mod for Quake. It too was a first-person shooter with a slightly more goofy style, but more or less the same gameplay. There was a glitch in the game, however, that inspired the famous spy character in later updates and the sequel. Player names were displayed on their characters, so you'd be able to tell friend from foe based on the color of text displaying their name. The bug in the original mod, however, displayed opposing players' names as the same color as your team, making it difficult to tell friend from foe. This would go on to inspire the spy class and its stealth-centric tactics. Mario's multi-coin blocks. There are several blocks in the original Super Mario Bros. That granted the player several coins if they kept hitting this. This would give you a higher score and could provide you an extra life. But these multi-coin providing bricks were originally an error by one of the programmers. The developers went back and fixed it but felt something was missing, so they went back and added the bug back in. Creepers in Minecraft. Minecraft creator Marcus Notch Persson originally intended the iconic creepers in Minecraft to be pigs. He didn't have access to a modeling program at the time, so he created them using code. He says he accidentally switched some of the numbers up, and instead of making the pig long like he wanted, he made it tall. When he saw the model in-game, he liked it, so he turned it green and made it an enemy. Diablo 2's Hammerdins. A Hammerdin in Diablo 2 was completely a fan discovery. Players found that by combining the magic items Concentration Aura and Blessed Hammer, it would cause the hammer to deal more damage. The hammer was only supposed to increase a character's physical strength and not affect damage output. Players started using this and even designing entire builds around it, so developer Blizzard decided to make it a feature on future games. The wave dash isn't the most well-known move in the world, but it is used by competitive and other hardcore players in the franchise. If you air dash down diagonally into the ground, your character will dash forward a little. The move doesn't seem that important, but it's huge in competitive play because it allows the player to perform a ground move while moving on the ground, something they otherwise couldn't do. The move was discovered by developer Masahiro Sakurai during testing, but didn't remove the ability because he didn't think it would make any significant impact on the games. Adventure contains the first Easter egg. The first ever Easter egg in a game was actually left by an Atari programmer in the Atari 2600 game Adventure. At the time, Atari did not credit its developers, which would later lead to the creation of Activision. But during the development of Adventure, the lone programmer on the game named Warren Robinett wanted to get his name out. Using a glitch in the game called sprite flickering, he hid an item in the game that you had to take to a secret location, then enter another room where you would find the text, "Created by Warren Robinett." It was too late for Atari to remove it, so they actually sold it as an added feature, calling it an Easter egg. Final Fantasy Peninsula of Power. This isn't so much as a glitch as it is an exploit, but the same thing. Basically, Final Fantasy worked on a grid system that was 8x8 tiles big. Which section of the grid you're currently on determines how difficult the enemies you'd face would be. However, there's a bit of small land near Pravaka that juts out into another grid containing more difficult enemies. While it's not possible to travel to this grid in full, going to this little plot of land would allow you to fight tougher enemies on this grid that you'd get to later in the game. Doing so would allow players to quickly grind multiple levels and essentially walk through the rest of the game with ease because they'd be at such a higher level than the game was anticipating.
And that wraps it up. What are your thoughts about this? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and share it on Twitter and Facebook. And why not consider subscribing? We upload some really cool videos almost every day. Thank you for watching this video and happy gaming!